Hey, good morning from still rainy Kansas City, and welcome to SportsBeat Live. And hey, thanks for working with us this morning. We figured with the lateness of last night's game, we'd have our post-game conversation this morning. Now, I know this probably disappoints our followers in Europe and Asia. Um, we have them, Uh, Gosh, it would have been just perfect timing. Morning drive time in Europe and early afternoon in Asia for a Chiefs post-game show. But look, this way we've had some time to sleep or nap and uh, and discuss. Now we're here to discuss the Chiefs' 38-20 loss over the Buffalo Bills with Herbie Teope, Vahe Gregorian, and Sam McDowell. Sam Mellinger is going to join us here soon. So I don't know if a few hours of sleep have changed the way you felt about the game, guys, afterwards. I'll start off by saying there's some interesting stats that I've heard. We're all scrambling for numbers after the game and so afterwards. And then this morning, just some really, crazy stuff. Yeah, we know about the turnovers, right? The Chiefs committed 4 against the Bills. They have now committed 11 turnovers since getting a takeaway, so minus 11 in that department, which is not good. It's not good. And the other one of the other ones I saw this on Twitter this morning that the Chiefs are allowing now for the season 7.1 yards per play. The NFL record on offense for yards per play is 7.0 by one of those greatest show on turf Rams teams. So the Chiefs are allowing more than the greatest offensive team has ever produced. So that's kind of where we are with the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'll before we get into this, and Vahe, I'll pick on you first, just because the column you wrote about maybe the Chiefs losing their aura. Just 6 games ago, the Chiefs beat the Bills by pretty much the same score the Bills beat the Chiefs, right? It was 38-21 in the AFC Championship game at Arrowhead, and last night was 38-20 Bills at Arrowhead. How the world has changed and flipped for those two teams in just a matter of 6 games, and so Vahe, I know you wrote a sort of an overarching column about this, a big picture view. Have the Chiefs lost their aura? And then we'll dig down into what the Chiefs specifically have lost.
Well, first of all, Blair, well said on the how. Really, I mean, that number really, I hadn't realized that 11 turnovers offered since any taken. That's just killer. But when you say that number, I mean, making every other team the greatest show on turf basically is what's happening, right? So that's fun to watch when you're covering the team that is the greatest show on turf. It's not so fun to watch when it's flipped on you. And so you got at the house pretty well. The why to me still seems a little curious. I know we've hit on this theme before, but obviously there's changes every year. Some of the changes that they made probably have not worked out. I think we're all still wondering about Jaron Reed and some things like that, but it still doesn't really add up to the things that look so crummy. I mean, this is still the core of a defense that was in the top 10 in the NFL the last 2 years, for instance. And the idea, there were a couple of plays yesterday that completely epitomized what we've been seeing. And obviously the Daniel Sorensen plays that left even Tyrann Mathieu putting his hands up in exasperation twice are a couple of them. And the play, I can't get this play out of my mind where Anthony Hitchens has a guy to cover underneath and he's still retreating as the guy's catching the ball and after the guy's caught the ball. So all that stuff, back to your original notion here, Blair, is we certainly have felt like, okay, this has been chipped away at, this idea that they inevitably are going to win. They are just better than everybody else ultimately, and because of Mahomes, everything's going to always be okay. And now, I mean, any semblance of that is really gone, right? It doesn't mean they can't still be good. Doesn't mean that a couple games from now they might not have a reset that makes you think, yeah, that's more like it. But I don't know that we're going to see any feeling of like, well, they're going to win because they're the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes again. And sorry about the dogs barking. We're going to get the house jackhammered today, which is, of course, a nice little parallel with what we saw last night.
Hey, Sam Ellinger has joined us. Good morning, Sam. And Jordan Tribe says, "Hate seeing you guys like this." Oh, I don't know. We're fine. Seeing us with a little bit of sleep, that's we'll take that. So, Sam, what's your to me one thing that you said something broke in you last week watching the Chiefs against the Eagles, and for me, I don't see the Chiefs as the Super Bowl, at least on the AFC side. The Super Bowl appearance is theirs to lose. Now they kind of have to fight and claw to be that team that we think can be the best team in the AFC. What say you?
Yeah, I mean they're sort of like a lot of teams, you know.
Yeah, how weird is that?
Yeah, they're ninth in the AFC right now, in the standings, closer to the bottom, like objectively closer to the bottom than the top, which I think is, sounds about right. I still think that there's enough talent on that team to be a good team and to be in the playoffs and all the things. But like that, I just think that ceiling that some of us thought they had before the season is gone. Like they're just, and I don't think that's coming back. Like I just don't think that the fixes required are in house because the offense has its own problems, and I'm not trying to like ignore that. That was terrible last night. The offense. I mean, the offense only outscored the Bills 20-7, right? When the offense had the ball. But the defense is just such a mess. Like I just Chris Jones didn't play, and we should keep that in mind. But there's no pass rush, and Daniel Sorensen, Juan Thornhill should be playing over Daniel Sorensen. I believe that in my soul. But Juan Thornhill's going to get burned if he's got to cover for 5 seconds. I mean, there's problems at every level, and I don't know that gets fixed between week 5 and the playoffs. I think it's too much by this point.
Yeah. Listen, I think we can start with 2 major problems, one on each side of the ball. The defense entirely, right? And starting with no pass rush, but then the back end gets exposed because there is no pass rush. And when they finally got a little pressure on Frank Clark on Josh Allen, Frank Clark got the penalty for roughing the passer. Let's stop there for a second. Herbie, was that the right call? Was that the penalty on Frank Clark? This is what losers do. We talk about bad calls, right, or potentially bad calls. But what did you see on that?
I'm gonna invoke my inner Andy Reid. It's a shame they called that.
Yeah. Hey, how many times did he say that?
Hey, Reid had to tread lightly there because as a head coach, he can't call out the officiating because they will call him Monday morning with a nice heavy fine. There are 2 thoughts here. Okay, from the initial look on the replay, okay, it looked innocent. From an NFL official point of view, they might have thought that Frank Clark drove Josh Allen into the ground. And, once you hit him, it's okay if you put your arms out and if you go to the ground with him, then that's fine. But when you wrap the guy up and you pile drive into the ground, that's what the league is trying to get away from. So it depends on your point of view there. The spirit of the rule, then yeah, I think that was the right call. But from where we were standing and then bang bang, it looked pretty innocent. But it's a shame they called that.
So I've heard, several times. But look, it's to be honest with you, to me the more alarm bells are sounding because of what I saw on offense last night. In Arrowhead Stadium with all your weapons. And look, I knew the rain, wet ball. I don't know if any of that was a factor, especially in the second half. But for for Tyreek Hill to let a ball bounce off his hands into the arms of Micah Hyde for a touchdown on the very first series when Patrick Mahomes, misfired to Travis Kelce, who was open by 20 yards, right? Nobody around him. It was clunky. It was the offense last night. Here's what, for the season, the Chiefs are getting outscored, which is what you'd expect a 2-3 team to that to happen to. But this offense should never be out. I mean, they should be able to outscore any team that they play, and that's just not happening. And I think what we're seeing on offense is just as disturbing as what's happening on the defensive side. Sam McDowell, I know that you wrote about Mahomes and his game, and may have been, it's certainly one of his worst games as a Chief, with 2 picks and a lost fumble, but certainly you can make a case that may have been his worst game.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say as disturbing as what the defense is going through, but the offense, it's tough for anybody in that game last night involved, really not to feel like the finger should be pointed at them in some capacity, or just that things didn't go well in some capacity. When you look at, your best 2 weapons on offense are outside of the quarterback or Travis Kelce, who got absolutely laid out on the last drive of the game. Not feeling great about that. Tyreek Hill, who we also learned has a little bit of a knee injury, Andy Reid said. And like you said, dropped a first down pass on the first drive. One of the absolute ugliest 17-play drives I've ever seen, by the way. And then drops another ball that goes right into Micah Hyde's hands for a pick 6. I thought the quarterback played as bad as he's ever played. And like I wrote, he's a guy that consistently takes responsibility after games. But last night it was accurate, and I don't know if it's ever really been accurate before. And he attributed some of those passes to the fact that the receivers and him weren't on the same page all the time. They've got some options on routes, and he thought a guy was going one way, they went the other. So it's not exactly running the wrong route. But that happened a lot more than we've ever seen it happen. And this all started on the first drive, by the way. I mean, it's sort of hard to remember this play because so much bad stuff happened after it. But Patrick Mahomes missed a wide open Travis Kelce on the first drive of the game for what was it, about 30, 35 yards down the right sideline. And you do wonder how different that game is if the Chiefs score a touchdown right off the bat against a team that came in as an underdog. So, yeah, I mean, the defense is bad. The special teams has turned it over 2 straight weeks and hasn't really made a play all season. But now the offense is suddenly an issue too. So I think I feel a lot differently about this 2-3 start than even I did the 1-2 start. I think there's a lot more to fix right now than there was even 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, the reason I say I'm more concerned about or just as concerned about the offense is my expectations for the offense are greater than what I think we've all agreed that if could be a middle of the pack defense, they should be okay. And look, it's the same offense that scored on all possessions but one last week in Philadelphia. Buffalo just could be a different animal, right? Even after 6 games, 6 games since they played last, Buffalo could have passed the Chiefs in just overall ability, right? And maybe we saw a changing of the guard. Is that possible last night that we saw a changing of the guard in the AFC and the Chiefs are, not only, I think, Sam, I heard you say this earlier, they're, if you, it's not a power ranking, but actual standing, the Chiefs are the 9th team in the AFC right now.
Yeah, the only thing I'd push back on about was it a changing of the guard is that I don't know, the Chargers might be the best team in the AFC. I just know it's not the team that plays at Arrowhead.
Or the Ravens.
Right.
One thing, Blair, too, along those lines, I've been thinking about this. If you don't throw out the past, right? But if we didn't have the context of the recent past to come into this season, and you were watching what this team does, you'd say it's the 9th best team in the conference, and that looks about right. That they have, flashes of things they can do well, but it doesn't look like one of the top teams in the conference. And again, we know it's 5 games, but the other thing, we've talked about this before too, they're losing with some of the stuff that has nagged at them, or if not haunted them for a few years on defense. But the stuff on offense, we look at it as out of character, but for this season, it's in character. I mean, they've lost all 3 games because of crucial turnovers. Do I have this number right? 10 turnovers in the 3 games they've lost. So that's the thing. At some point, you are what you're doing, and right now they're a team that gives the ball away and gets scorched deep all the time,
and doesn't have takeaways. Gives it away and doesn't take it away. That's another look. Dan Sorensen's he's the face of this stretch, right? He's the one that is incurring all the wrath on social media, and he's played poorly. I mean, really poorly. I agree. Shouldn't be. Snap counts came out this morning. 100% of the snaps last night. Daniel Sorensen. What is that? Why is that happening? Can anybody explain that?
I can probably take a stab at this. Okay, you got to remember Daniel Sorensen plays the hybrid linebacker role, and Juan Thornhill doesn't do that. So when you got a safety in Steve Spagnuolo's scheme, he likes to move him around, and if Thornhill doesn't have that skill set to play a linebacker because he's not as big as Daniel Sorensen, and that's what affects this situation here. When they go to a nickel and they go to a dime, there's only one bona fide linebacker on the field, and who more often is lining up in the box there? And it's Sorensen. So, when you look at the other safeties on this Chiefs roster right now, they don't have anyone like that. And that's why he's seeing a lot of action. But yeah, his flaws are highlighted and magnified every time he's missing a tackle in the box. I mean, I think I counted maybe 3 or 4 Olay tackles as we're up there. I was like, and I always looked at Blair. It's like, is that 49 again? And Blair's like, yeah, that was 49. Or you hear Blair in the press box, there's Sorensen again. But, if you're going to be in a hybrid linebacker role, you got to make the darn tackle. That's just the bottom line. You can't be Olaying it and then letting the guy gain 4 or 5 more yards down the field.
To me, if that's the reason, it's not a good one, because when you only play 2 safeties, you don't need one of them to be the linebacker. You need that when you bring a third safety on the field in dime packages. But with just 2 safeties, you need somebody who can run. And Tyrann Mathieu, for all of his strengths, he's not the fastest player on the field. Dan Sorensen, we know, is nowhere near the fastest player on the field. So one of those guys is being forced to play center field all the time, and they're constantly getting burned in center field. The fly balls are dropping out there. And last night, Sorensen got beat so badly on both of those routes. He gets all twisted up by Stephon Diggs. And like you mentioned, we see Tyrann Mathieu mid-play with his hands up. And I thought Tyrann Mathieu's press conference after the game was just really telling. I mean, he might as well have been mentioning Dan Sorensen by name with some of those comments he made. I mean, he said, cover your guy, make tackles. When you don't do that, it's embarrassing. And we all know at least one guy that we can include on both of those lists. And, I think that there's a lot of frustration within that defensive room because there's some guys executing assignments and some guys not. And I think that's going to be a play now too, is can this group stay together to get that solution in play, or, are we going to see guys starting to point the finger at one another especially when these things pop up on film? I mean, everybody, we might not know everybody's exact assignment, especially on the Diggs play, because that was a zone defense. The Knox touchdown is so clearly Dan Sorensen to all of us. But the Diggs play, it's a little more unclear. It's a zone play. But everybody in that room knows whose assignments that is. And so how does this team internally handle that, the fact that somebody is consistently blowing assignments? I'm sure it's not the same person all the time. But, man, it sure as hell looked like the same person a lot last night.
You're making me think of something that as we think of all the exotic packages and remedies they try, you kids aren't old enough to remember all this, but Blair and I could go back to an era where you just played the 4-3-4 and you went with your best 11 and let the chips fall where they may. And I'm joking mostly, but it does back up your point about just Sorensen versus Thornhill, for instance, in terms of athleticism. I just feel like they are really not seeing the big picture. It's one of those definition of insanity things. They keep doing the same thing over and over, and it's not changing.
That's not to hug this player, but that's a key word for me with this whole defense is when he mentions the athleticism. This team just isn't very athletic on defense. I mean, Sam mentioned the fact that last week ahead of this game that Steve Spagnuolo said they wanted to play fast, and we wondered how are they going to do it. They don't have a lot of guys who play fast on this defense. You know, I mean, Willie Gay, if he's healthy, which he made a season debut last night, he needs to play more because he is athletic. You know, Nick Bolton has looked slow in coverage. Juan Thornhill needs to play because he is athletic. I just think they need to get more athletes on the field right now. That seems to be one of the things that's lacking right now.
The other thing that to me that's lacking is they haven't had their entire defense out there healthy. You know, you've got a whole bunch of reserves filling in for Shavarius Ward. Clark was out, 3 or 4 games, 5 games. Chris Jones has now missed a game. And, you know, Spags, I think Spags actually mentioned that Thursday, you know, we want to get healthy so we have everybody on the field that we wanted to start the season with. And they just haven't had that opportunity yet. But, you know, to your guys' point earlier, the Bills just exposed them. You know, everything that we thought was wrong, the Bills just highlighted it with a yellow highlight marker because everything we thought was wrong with the Chiefs, now everybody in the country knows. You know, I was chuckling last night with all the national media. This Chiefs defense is bad. Well, we've been saying that since week 1, guys. You know, they got to get healthy. That's the other thing about it too.
You know, the back end lack of speed on this Chiefs defense, the safeties, the linebackers that we mentioned here, could be mitigated a little bit with a pass rush and little pressure on the quarterback, and that just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. You know, Frank Clark, you know, played. I didn't see his snap count, but I think he was on the field most of the night. And Josh Allen
snaps.
Okay. Josh Allen, and correct me if I'm wrong, didn't get sacked. I thought the Chiefs did a great job. It was after the Byron Pringle fumble on the kickoff return, which how does that happen for a second straight week? But the Bills didn't score on their possession, even though they were set up in great field position, because on third down, they sent L'Jarius Sneed and Mike Dana came after Allen pretty well, and he ended up getting that intentional grounding penalty. Don't you think it's time for is it unreasonable to make this kind of adjustment with his defense and just bring more pressure? Is that too simple, too elementary? That nothing is really working, and we haven't seen them dial up pressure in a big way. Shouldn't that be part of the solution, at least for now, until they get healthy? That we'll see. Bring in a linebacker, bring in Sneed, just putting some pressure on a quarterback, making it difficult for him to find the open receivers all the time.
This sounds like a reactionary fan thing, but I believe it like in my soul is that they should be taking a lot of chances on defense, blitzes, and just doing some borderline crazy stuff because they're giving up touchdowns anyway. Like the risk is less, when the defense is this bad. They got one quarterback hit last night. One. Mike Dana was credited with one quarterback hit. I mean, that's just that's not going to play. So yeah, I think that they should be taking some really major risks, and I think guys should be selling out to try and knock the ball loose, create some fumbles. Like it's just I think they've got to just wherever that normal risk reward calculus is, like put the pedal to the floor here and see if you can create something.
One thing that's kind of extra alarming is they could barely put pressure on the quarterback when he was running 9 yards through the middle of the field to score a touchdown. I mean, that play bugged me. I don't know why more than a lot of those other plays. It just was so easy for him. And as Sam McDowell pointed out at the time, at that point, Josh Allen had rushed for 42 yards when his season high was 44. That was after the first drive. And it just, to me, again, speaks to, there's a hollow core in the middle that they're able to exploit, and conversely, they're not able to generate any rush. I might be wrong. You guys might have looked back at more of it than I've been able to, but I thought they did try to bring a little extra pressure a couple times and just got nowhere.
Well, I'll tell you what, Paul and Kyle both suggest, and they're right about this, that in the second half, the Chiefs did bring a little more pressure and had some success on the first few series, right? But they didn't make up any ground because that's when the pick six happened in the third quarter. But the Chiefs did force punts, didn't they, on the first couple of Bills possessions of the first three of the second half, and that's a little bit of progress anyway. I mean, that's. But they're down, what, 24, was it 24-13 at halftime, and the hour and 15-minute halftime. So, and then the Bills get the ball to start the second half. The Chiefs force a punt, get it back. I think the pick six happens on the ensuing possession. If it doesn't, it's the following one. And all of a sudden it's 31-13, and that's pretty much ball game. And
it is funny though, Blair, as you say this. I mean, we know this, all of us, of course, but all of it really does remind you how complementary the game has to be successful. I mean, you can't have a huge defensive meltdown in one half and then a bad offensive half the next half and have a shot. I mean, each thing really does completely fall sway to the other, and that's exactly what we saw last night. Heck, that's wherever. I guess it was 4 punts by the end. I mean, you're right. Chiefs had gone, as Sam McDowell checked my math on this, it was 95 minutes and 7 seconds without creating a punt. Now, part of that's because teams are going for it and making it sometimes too. But anyway, it's the whole operation. And it's funny. The more we talk about it, I think two things. One is, boy, they're really in a bad spot. It really looks terrible. But the flip side is you can't help but think if the defense just started the game playing like that last night, the way it played in the second half, and if the offense didn't give even just a pick six, and they chances are they win that game. And it's certainly not thinking about an 18-point blowout.
I thought Patrick Mahomes said something interesting after the game too, saying that the Chiefs are seeing coverages that they haven't seen before, and they don't see them from these teams in scouting. Which, look, that's a big credit to Leslie Frazier and other defensive coordinators that are, that are preparing to play the Chiefs. And but how about that comment that they're not. They're playing against defenses they don't recognize. Is that worth further exploration?
Yeah, I thought that stood out to me as well, and I'm certainly not like in real time when we're up there in the press box smart enough to diagnose exactly what he's talking about. But I don't think I don't buy into that. Like, there's not a blueprint, right? Like, there's not like, all you got to do is A, B, and C, and you too can shut down the Chiefs offense. Like, I don't think that's how it works, but they're obviously doing something. And I think they're also taking advantage of, like, Mahomes wasn't like terrible. Like, there's times he's not as sharp as others, and that's as dull. I don't know. That's like the least sharp that I can remember him in a long time. There were just passes. You mentioned that one, Blair, Sam, the one to Kelsey on that first drive that he missed by a bunch. But there were also some others I felt like it was on the wrong shoulder, or ball was a little late. There was one, it was a third or fourth down. I think it was a third down where Hardman was coming across the middle and he had him. Like, Hardman was right there and he was open, but it looked like Patrick was sort of like, I don't trust that guy. Is one of my other guys open? And then, it was too late and he had to go to Hardman. It just was incomplete. I was just on the first drive. I was just watching some of this morning. Again, there was a ball to Tyreek on the left sideline. It was a 2nd and 7, and it's a ball that Mahomes has completed to Tyreek dozens of times, and it just was off. It was outside and it was incomplete. There was just stuff like that too that I think that the Bills coverage kind of amplified or took advantage of.
One of the things about coverage that's really interesting, if they are seeing different twists and turns, I mean, I think it's easy to forget that, there's a lot of situations where where the receiver is going is predicated on the coverage, and both the quarterback and the receiver reading the same coverage at the same time. So when things are disguised or when things are new, that might account a little bit for the Kelsey play. I'm not sure that's what happened on that play. It might have just been a terrible pass, the one we were talking about on the first drive. But there were certainly a half dozen instances where it appeared from Patrick's gestures that he expected somebody to be, either taking a different angle or have a little different depth. And that's the kind of thing coverage can do to you if they're disguising it well, or you don't know what you've seen and you're getting different reads from the different participants.
Yeah, he spent a lot of time talking to his receivers last night. The one that really stood out to me was late in the first half. I think with just about 11 seconds left, they're trying to get, inside the 15, maybe run another play to the end zone. And there's a safety down Patrick Mahomes' left side with Tyreek Hill. He thinks Tyreek Hill's going to run the corner. Instead, he runs the post. That's the type of options that they have. Which way is the safety leaning, or which way are his hips turned? I go in the opposite direction. Those were the things he was reading so differently with his receivers. We saw a play over the middle with McCole Hardman where it looked like if Hardman just keeps running, it's going to be open. Hardman sits down. It's an incomplete pass. And Mahomes, it seems like a lot of times he might keep it to himself, but not when that guy's involved. And I just think there's a lot more frustrations with trying to get on the same page as McCole Hardman as there is with anybody. But, the other thing that's interesting about this is Anthony Hitchens said the exact same thing Friday. I'm sure Herbie remembers that as well, but he said offenses are playing them differently than they're playing against every other defense that they see, so that the film is not doing them a whole lot of good, that they watch film of these teams and then they see something completely different than what they've seen on film because of the way their defense is playing. I think it's really interesting that teams have decided we're not going to be who we are against this team. We're going to be what we know is their weakness. I mean, that's part of being where the Chiefs are, part of being so good for the past couple of years. But it also shows that the teams out there think they have some vulnerabilities right now.
So Josh Gordon played yesterday. It was good to see him on the field and caught a pass. Nice reception for him. And so I think we'll see his play steadily increase going forward, and he'll bring another weapon certainly to the Chiefs. Herbie, we usually start with injuries, but we'll start winding down with that. We'll hear from Andy Reid a little bit later today, but there is potentially a big one for the Chiefs with tell us what you saw with Clyde Edwards-Helaire last night.
Yeah, they're kind of banged up right now. Edwards-Helaire got bent up in the third quarter, and he's on the ground. He's pounding his fist on the ground, and that's usually not a good sign. He probably knows the severity of the injury more than what we know at this point. And the fact that Tyreek Hill and Darrell Williams put him on their shoulders or wrapped his hands around his shoulder to take him into to the sideline. He was evaluated in the blue medical tent for a brief period before he did walk into the locker room area, but he was walking very gingerly, and that's the key injury. Mac neither mentioned Tyreek Hill. Joe Tooney suffered a fractured hand. That's something else to think about. Is he going to require surgery, or is he just going to play with a cast? Travis Kelce with the stinger late in the game, and then Chris Lamons. Did I pronounce that correctly, Mac? Not Lamons, Lamons suffered a skin alteration. What do you call it? A skin, whatever. He's fine.
Laceration.
Okay. Yeah, laceration. There we go. So he's fine though. But CEH is the big one because right now the Chiefs carry 3 running backs on the active roster: Jerick McKinnon, as well as Darrell Williams, and then they also have Derek Gore on the practice squad. So what happens at the running back position is really going to depend on CEH's health.
Okay, let me ask you guys this. The Chiefs have played, they're one in, toss out the Eagles game, just so they've played in the AFC, the Browns, Chargers, Ravens, and Bills. I've got all 4 of those teams as playoff teams this year, and I probably thought about it that way before the season started, and you can make a case that this has been the most difficult stretch of the Chiefs schedule. They're committing bunch of turnovers. That something that seems fixable to me. The defense is alarmingly bad, but I trust Spagnuolo to look at his. I look at his history, and Spagnuolo defenses have improved throughout the year. So for fans, Chiefs followers that are, they're emotional, they're angry, of course they're passionate people. Is it? Uh, but I like to think of you guys, this panel, as being a little bit more reasonable. Uh, how big should the level of concern be for this team to not be a playoff team? Really, that's all that matters, right? Not if you're the one seed, that's great, but just getting in the playoffs is what matters. And have we seen enough from the first 5 games to believe that it's not, what we're seeing is not fixable, and this team can't hang with the best teams in the AFC?
Is the standard getting to the playoffs? Is that the freak out?
To me, I think it has to be, right. You get to the playoffs, anything can happen. The Tampa Bay Bucks were a 5 seed last year. They won 3 road games before winning the Super Bowl. Get to the playoffs.
Yeah, I think they can get to the playoffs. I think there's enough talent on that team that they can get into the playoffs, but I don't trust them to win in the playoffs. I really don't. I trust them to score a lot of points in the playoffs. I think that they've got some issues on offense with some of this new, coverages or whatever, but that team's going to score points. I mean, it's just there's too much over there. But I don't. The fixes on defense are just hard to come up with.
Yeah, I think they'll benefit some from seeing these coverages early in the season, as opposed to, I think, what they saw in the Super Bowl last year, for example, really caught them by surprise. I think they're less inclined to be surprised in the playoffs this year. Patrick Mahomes had a great quote about that last night. And I can't remember the exact words, but it said, if that's what we're going to face every week, I want it, because that's what we're going to see in the playoffs. I think there's something to that. But obviously, if this team is going to make a Super Bowl run, the defense has to be better, and they're going to have to win on the road. We haven't said that the past 2 years, so they're going to have to win some road games. But I'm still at the stage where I would be shocked if this team's not playing the playoffs, especially with 7 of the 16 getting in.
Quickly, that was in reference to being asked about getting every team's best shot.
Yeah,
and Mahomes said that I wouldn't want it any other way, basically.
Yeah,
I'll say
he is alluding to the defenses they're facing as well.
I'll say this is a dose of reality to the folks when the schedule came out and the projections of 16-1 and 15-2. But like for us, because we've talked about this on this show, we knew that the first half of the schedule was going to be tough. There was no ands, ifs, buts about it. And this is the dose of reality. The schedule does get very easy here rather quickly. You got a road game, Washington. Tennessee is going to be a tough game. You got a very winnable game against the Giants. So they have time to fix this and right the ship. This is a playoff team. I firmly believe that. This is a playoff team, but I don't think they're the best team in the NFL at this point.
I think it's a mix of things, right? I keep going back to this, and going into the season, the Chiefs had won 25 of the last 27 games Mahomes had started, and now they're 2-3 this season. So obviously it's disconcerting. A lot of the elements are there. I think Sam Mellinger said it nice and succinctly. They're going to score points. And Blair, you the two of us were joking with a friend the other day that do they really need Josh Gordon? And is that going to make them a couple points better? Is that really going to be a difference maker? And it appears that they're going to need every point they can get. And if they, it's sort of the same thing we were saying and going into 2019 now. If they can just get the defense to a place where there's some consistent competence in general, you're not going to expect teams to be held under 20 points, but how about under 30? Then you're telling me there's a chance.
You said early in the season, I think it was just after 1 week, that this team was going to lose some games in the first month.
Yeah, I do remember saying that, and thanks for reminding me, just not because I was right, but because the thought I had at the time was well, we think they're going to lose some games probably because it's just going to take a little while for the offensive line to come together. And there's some question marks there, right? But that's not why. And I think that's the thing that's a little more unsettling. Like, you could see that logically should be an issue for them. 5 new guys on the offensive line, just that it would be 3 rookies. That ain't why they're losing. And thus the way they're losing is more troubling.
Well, I blame last night on Salvador Perez for banging the drum, mixing teams like that. Poor Salvador Perez. Now he's associated with the worst home loss in the Andy Reid era. Tough break for Salvi.
Blame it on Salvi.
So, all right, you guys. Thanks for adjusting your schedules and being with us. Thanks to everybody who tuned in. That was that's fantastic that you were with us this morning when we try to come at you after the games, but that half hour or the hour halftime delay threw us all off yesterday, and certainly threw the Chiefs off. Something did. It was many things. So for Sam McDowell, Vahe Gregori, and Herbie Tiopi, Sam Mellinger, and our producer, Beth Welsh, thanks for joining us. Be back here with us on Friday, 9:30 a.m., and we will preview Sunday's game against the Washington football team, and we'll tell you what the coaches and players have said during the week. You guys have a good morning.